Oh my God, folks, you cannot believe it, but the days of crying with onions are basically over. Onions just created the world's first tearless onion, so we're going to celebrate that by making 10 creative onion recipes.
And the crazy thing about this onion is that there was a farmer that worked on it his entire career. He dedicated his life to the tearless onion, which I think is that's a pretty incredible pursuit, because I know like my whole mind was just completely blown during the filming of this video. It almost didn't make sense. I'm sitting there cutting onions, like a lot of onions. We did 5 recipes each. And when you're not crying, it's so strange. It's like, oh my God, the onion can be the star now. I don't have to be scared of this thing anymore.
Yeah, so if you guys want to know where to get them, check your local market. They're starting to ship them out around the country. Onions, they're pretty freaking awesome. And one of my favorite things is typically when onions sit, they get more and more spicy. So the way through crossbreeding and stuff, not through GMO, but just crossbreeding, and this guy must have been a farming genius. I mean, he retired after he figured this thing out. As the onion sits, instead of getting spicier, it actually gets more mild. So what's amazing is when you eat it, you don't have that like raw onion taste in your mouth. It's my least favorite part of onions. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, this thing you can actually eat raw. It's super sweet.
Take a bite. Take a bite. Do it. Do it.
That's actually not quite an apple, but that's pretty good. And you can imagine if you can eat it raw, it's going to be incredible when you cook it down and you really bring out those sugars, which you will see in this video. So in celebration, we're going to show you 10 of our favorite onion recipes. That's a lot of recipes. We're bringing the heat, we're bringing the onion sweetness. So let's get into it. So to kick off the entire video, I'm going to do a caramelized onion jam. But the great thing about this recipe is, one, you're not going to be crying. You're going to be cooking a bunch of onions with no issues. Two, I'm going to actually use this recipe in a bunch of other recipes. So once you make this, you're well on your way to making a ton of different onion recipes.
And keep in mind, of course, you can use regular onions for this, but this video is sponsored by Onions, so we're showcasing their amazing tearless onion.
And they're just delicious onions, so it worked out great. So first we are gonna slice a ton of onions. Again, I normally would have been scared of this situation, but look, slicing like 6 onions here and 0 tears. Couldn't understand it, still don't get it, but you know, I will get over that soon. I'm gonna add a little bit of oil to like a heavy pan and toss in all of my onions. I'm gonna sprinkle on just a little bit, not sprinkle, I would say drizzle on some honey, and then add in a little apple cider vinegar. I like the extra acidity you can add something else as well, any type of vinegar. A little bit of salt, and don't worry that they're really piled up here. Once we place the lid on like this, it's gonna steam it up and it's really gonna break down those onions. Now, the key is to stir these on very low heat. You're not trying to like brown them like you're sauteing. This is a slow caramelizing of those sugars over time. So just keep it on low heat and just stir it. And mine probably took, 1.5 to 2 hours to really get to this point when they are just that deep, rich caramel, golden brown, but no like burnt, no super dark browning right there. It's that nice richness. Now all you got to do is just jar those up, and you'll see I'm going to use those in a bunch of other dishes, but that is just incredible stuff right there. Just having that around was such a treat to spread on my toast or whatever you can think of.
Caramelized onions are amazing. If you guys don't know about them, they will change your life. My personal favorite of this whole experience, so I made a lot of great stuff. This kind of happened by accident. I meant to make beer-battered onion rings, and I ended up making beer-battered donut onion rings. And I don't know if they're a first of their kind, but they might as well be. Took some all-purpose flour and some salt, pepper, a little bit of baking powder. And if you want to make it extra cold, you can add a little bit of ice cubes, but it's not necessary. Beer to a bowl. And I kind of mix that around, and I'm basically making this cake-like batter. So think less of like thin liquid, more like pancakey batter. And then you take your onions, you slice them up into nice rounds and kind of pick your favorite sizes. And pick based on, I would say, like what your frying vessel is. Like I use a small little saucepan, so I didn't have too much. So I was using smaller rings. And then what you do is you toss the onions in flour. That's gonna help the batter stick to those freaking glorious onions. Then get some oil on high, whatever kind of neutral oil, canola, vegetable, avocado, whatever you want. Get it to about 350. You dip in the onions that were tossed in flour into the batter, and then just kind of let a little bit of batter leak off and then pop it right into the oil. And what happened, because of the baking powder, they kind of puffed up. So when I took them out, they looked like these sort of cakey, amazing onion ring donut things. I hit them with some barbecue sauce and scallions, although you could have glazed them, which would have been amazing because the sweetness of the onion and the bread was just so good.
Those look insane in the membrane. Okay, I'm moving on to an onion bread. So I'm going to use those caramelized onions. And you know, I'm just making sourdough up the wazoo over here. So I made a little sourdough last night and I let that ferment overnight so it got nice and fluffy. And all I did was take a greased pan, just like a casserole dish, hit that with just a little olive oil, greased it up, and then I took the dough and just kind of pushed it in like a deep dish pizza, covered that with the towel, put the light on the oven to give me a little extra degree action in the oven, and put that in there to proof because I just wanted a little more rise so I get a nice fluffy final bread. When that comes out, I let it proof for about an hour. You can see this is nice and puffed up. And all I did was make some dimples with my fingers like that. And then I pushed in some garlic slices into all of those dimples, completely covered that with the caramelized onion jam. And then I just baked it in the oven at 500 degrees for about 20 to 25 minutes until the inside of the bread was around 210 degrees. I took that out to rest, and I actually did let this one rest. It was such a beautiful piece of bread that I gave it. I usually can't wait when bread comes out of the oven hot, but I gave it its time to rest and just sprinkled on some Parmesan cheese. Just grated that on top for a little extra salty kick. Cut that thing up, and you've got onion bread.
Check. Hot damn! Where is that bread? Send me some of that freaking bread. So I kind of wanted to make the onions a star of this next dish. So I went to the Thai route because Thai love the flavor and they love getting creative, taking one thing and doing multiple things with it. So the first thing I did was I sliced my onions super thin with a mandolin. If you don't have one, I'm not going to judge you. Just cut it. You know how that works. And then what's pretty cool, I took some oil and I got the oil kind of like sort of hot and then just tossed all the onions in and brought the temperature up. And it just started to crisp them up. So typically in a lot of Thai recipes, they have shallots and they'll fry them, make them crispy, but trying to peel a gazillion shallots, not only are you crying and bawling, but it takes forever. So I'm realizing with these onions, I can do a ton of them and crisp them up just as well. And they fried up super well in the oil, and then you have this crispy little treat you can add to the stuff. Then, so this is kind of like a large salad. I cooked some ground chicken, just really low with some salt, and I made a Thai dressing. I took some lime, some sugar, some fish sauce, and some chili, and mix that together. Just get a nice balance. Taste it. If it tastes like good, you're good. If it tastes bad, just add some more stuff. You'll figure it out. Just flow with life. So some of the onions that I cut, I kept raw. So I added to that ground chicken once it was cooled down. The raw onions, I added scallions, fresh cilantro, lemongrass, a toasted rice powder, which is basically you put rice on low and kind of mix it around until it turns golden, and you just bash it up. I added the dressing and some of the crispy onions. I mixed that all together, and then I topped it with some more crispy onions, a little chili powder. And this has become one of my favorite salads to eat because it's just like super fresh. It's meaty, but it's balanced. It's spicy, umami, and the onions just took it to another level.
It looks like a classic Thai flavor explosion right there.
You're getting exploding onions all over your face and your mouth, but no tears. The only tears I cried, tears of joy. These onions do not hold you back from tears of joy when you eat something so good.
Moving on to the tofu artichoke onion dip. This is one of those dishes that you create when you are running out of ingredients and you just have some weird stuff lying. Like, that's the beautiful thing about onions is normally you have them lying around in your pantry or fridge, and that's where this dish came from. So the first thing I start out with is just sauteing up a bunch of onions. You can do this process a little faster than the caramelized onions. We just want to bring out some of those sugars. Then once those are nice and browned, you're going to add those to a food processor. I add in some whole artichokes, and then I take some tofu. Again, it was just what I had lying around, but it added such nice creaminess and almost made this thing a dip. You can use firm, you can use silken, soft, whatever you want. I'm using some firm right here. hit it with just a little bit of salt. And then the last ingredient, the bonus ingredient, is a little truffle oil, completely optional. But for me, if you have any type of truffle product lying around, truffle salt, truffle oil, it really adds a cool dimension to this dip. Process it till so creamy, nice and creamy, and you will see how I use this coming up very shortly after Josh does his recipe. But you can just eat that with vegetables or however you eat another dip, but I've got a secret way to use it.
That sounds like a much healthier and lighter, and you made more delicious version than our mom's artichoke dip, which is basically artichokes, cream cheese, butter.
Was there onions in that artichoke dip?
I don't know. I think it was just blending artichokes with every dairy product on the human planet.
And then throwing it in an oven at like 450 for like an hour until it just becomes one.
Oh god, molten lava. Yeah, you can't pick out any.
Molten lava.
Molten lava. God, it's so good, but I'm burning. Okay, so this one is a quick one, but something I will claim that I invented. Even if I didn't, I think I did. Onion jerky. So my wife does not eat meat, so a lot of times we're trying to figure out like how to take our favorite things and kind of unmeatify them. So I realized that if you caramelize onions and you dehydrate them, you can make this like onion jerky, which has the same kind of vibe, but maybe even better. So first thing I do is I slice up a ton of onions super thin, and then I put them in a pan with a little bit of oil, kind of on medium heat. And this is a trick my good friend Jeremy Mansky showed me. If you take baking soda and you just sprinkle just ever so slightly, it's got to be a tiny bit of it, just a little sprinkle of it around and mix it together, the onions are going to caramelize in not like an hour and a half like Mike did, but they'll caramelize in minutes. And it's a bit of a different caramelization, but somehow some kind of sciencey chemical reaction thing happens. And then
you're trying to beat the system, and there's just no... I don't trust this process.
No, I've beat the system before.
You didn't beat the system.
This is actually a really cool trick. I use it all the time. It's a different type of caramelization, but the onions break down super quick, and within 5 minutes, you've got these beautiful. They're almost more like golden versus like a brown caramelized onion. And then I add salt and pepper to that. I like to add a lot of black pepper. It's kind of like a black pepper jerky. And then I take a dehydrator and put it on 125, 130. Put it on the sheet and kind of spread it out on some parchment paper onto that sheet, and then you just dehydrate it. If you don't have a dehydrator, toss it in your oven at the lowest temperature. Maybe leave the onion door open a little bit.
We're inventing tierless onions, and we're inventing onion doors.
So then you just dehydrate it. Once it's done overnight, you take it out and you can cut it up into strips, or you peel it, and you have this beautiful sort of chewy, sweet onion jerky.
All right, friends, it is time to use that delicious spread that we just made. You don't have to use it for this dish, but really the trick in this dish is using this onion as a ring mold for an egg. And you might have seen this, but I'm going to show you how to perfect it. So first we're going to get a little pan on about a medium heat. And what I'm going to do is cook up some bacon. We're going to make, a bacon, egg, and cheese. And I didn't have bacon. I had guanciale, which is pork jowl, which is even tastier.
Guanciale, egg, and cheese?
Guanciale, egg, and cheese. So once that's cooked up nice and crispy, I take that out, and you've got all that grease. So I'm going to take a little more sourdough for you, Josh, and throw that into the pan and get it nice and crispy on both sides, so it really soaks up all of that oil.
So when you go to pinch a loaf, are you actually pinching a loaf?
It's just the only thing that comes out is just a sourdough loaf. So now what we're going to do is slice up this onion, and it's just like, making onion rings. But what I did was I actually took two that were together. I wanted a little more onion action in this dish rather than just one slice. I put it in the pan, and if there's not enough oil, just add a little more. And I got it crispy on one side for about 1 to 2 minutes. Then I flip that over on the other side. That's when you crack in the egg and just let that cook and solidify on the bottom for another 2 minutes. Once you start seeing that egg cooking, then you can flip it over, and all it needs is like 30 seconds if you still want runniness in your egg. Now let's plate this up. We're gonna take that crispy sourdough bread. We're gonna spread on some of that artichoke, onion, tofu, truffle dip. And then we're gonna hit it with the guanciale, then we're gonna hit it with the egg, and then I like to grate on some cheese that will just gently melt over that. And you can't forget a little bit of sriracha. I had some homemade sriracha. You can find the recipe below. I'll link that below if you want to make your own. Delicious.
Ooh, guanciale, egg and cheese. This is like some high class brothers green.
High class.
Love it. Okay, braised onions are a thing. Not really a thing, but I'm making them a thing. So oftentimes braising, you're cooking something in the liquid. I usually use meats, but I thought it'd be fun to see how far we could push this onion to the limit. Push it to the limit. Okay, so what I did was I cut the top and the bottom of the onion off, and then I peeled it. If you want a trick to peel onions and you don't want to like cut into it, you just kind of make a tiny little slit in the onion, and then you peel around. And then what I did was I got a cast iron pan out. I added some oil to the pan. I put 4 onions in there. I added some celery, carrots, mushrooms, ginger, salt, pepper. It's kind of whatever you got that's like sort of the aromatic deliciousness. And then I started cooking the onions and everything together, started mixing it around, flipped the onions once, and then I dumped in some of that good loving wine. So I put the wine in, put a little water. I got my oven at sort of an arbitrary 430 degrees Fahrenheit because people never use 430. So it's 425. So I threw it at 430. I've never seen a 435 recipe. It's like, who? So, and I put the cast iron pan into the oven and I just let it cook for like an hour, hour and a half. Just sort of, it's not quite low and slow, but you keep it open. And what happens is the water starts evaporating and all the juices, the vegetables and the onions cook together. And then when you pull it out, I kind of flip the onions over once, put it back in, and then take it out for the final time. And you end up with these like beautifully golden brown onions and this juice in there. And you just kind of cut into them and you eat them. And this is more of a classic thing. You could add some parsley at the end or rosemary. It's a little bit more of like a classic dish, you know, onionified, but it was delicious.
That's incredible because, again, it's like you don't think about using onions as the star of the dishes, but with these tier list guys, it's a different game. You're not scared of the onion anymore.
Yeah, the onion marketing is already good. Like onions are getting into everything. There's not a question. They're in almost every recipe, but you rarely get them as like the lead. You know?
The lead star.
You want to see more onion leads.
Now, luckily, I have my brother, my real brother on the line right here because he can back up the fact that I used to eat this next dish I'm going to show you how to make. Every single time I went to a restaurant, this is the only thing I ordered for probably a good like 4 or 5 years of my life. And what was that, Josh?
We thought there was something wrong with Mike. French onion soup, for whatever reason, it was the only thing he ordered, and like he would have eaten his whole meal by the time our food came because he always got it as an appetizer. But it was
because you know it was an appetizer. It was a soup, and I wasn't gonna wait. Like I could have my dish, as quick as possible. This creamy, delicious, melty cheese and bread. It just has everything you could want in it. But I agree, there was probably something wrong with me at that time, and maybe still. Well, there's something wrong with all of us, I guess.
And that's a good way to put it. But yeah, it was always very odd to me. Like but Mike wouldn't even look at a menu, and if they didn't have French onion soup, he would go in the kitchen and force the down. You mean to tell me?
Okay.
That part might be a lie.
Now, the cool thing about this French onion soup is I'm going to use the caramelized onion jam that I made. If you don't have that, then you just have to go back to that step and redo that step. But if you have that, this dish comes together in just a few minutes. So I took a little pot, and this thing's perfect because I'm actually going to plate the whole thing in here. So it's nice to have a small pot like this. I add the onions to the pot on about a medium heat. And then I take a little bit of thyme off the stem, which is a classic pairing with onions. And I made a beef stock out of oxtail. I cooked that the night before. And what makes this French onion soup extra special is I'm going to take some of the beef that came off the bones and add that to this dish to make it just a little heartier. And then I'm going to sprinkle in just a little apple cider vinegar. You can use wine, but just a little acidity will really help the final flavor. And then just pour on the beef stock over that. And all you have to do is just simmer this for like 5 minutes, until all of those flavors really melt together and everything just nicely cooks through. And once again, let's layer on some fresh sourdough. So that's 3 dishes, 3 out of my 5 onion dishes that have fresh sourdough in there. And then just grate on some cheese. I'm using like a classic Gruyere, which is very, very French, which works with this dish, but anything melty will be fine. Provolone will work. And then throw that in the broiler and just get it nice and crispy. It's getting that balance between the melty cheese, but also getting a nice crisp on the bread, because when you use your spoon to just smash into that, you want the flavor and you want the texture, you want the temperature. And it's why, for me, this dish was king.
Wow. French onion soup. I don't know why it's something I never go to, but whenever I see it, it's just such a brilliant dish. I want to make it.
I sat there and just ate the entire thing, and I haven't had a good French onion soup in a while. It was so good. And this was inspired by French Guy Cooking, who has the ultimate guide to French onion soup.
Well, thank you guys for watching this video. Please
wait, don't you have one more?
Son of a bitch. Okay, I got one more. Mike told me I forgot I have one more. All right.
You can't screw the people.
Final thing, you've probably seen pickled red onions, but it's rare that people are pickling other onions, usually because they're not very sweet. So I wanted to try to not only pickle this onion, but I wanted to do a special pickle, one that would just blow your freaking mind. So first you make the pickling solution. All you're doing is you're taking vinegar, sugar, salt, and that's the kind of standard pickling solution. Usually you'd add water, but I'm gonna hold off for now. So then I add coriander seeds, chili, garlic, and lemongrass. And the reason that I added that is because it just sort of gives it this Thai, maybe Vietnamese flair to it. So even those onions, they just go so well with so many things. And at that point, you bring the temperature up just below boil, because you want the sugar and salt to melt. And then turn off the heat and toss in ice cubes. A good friend of mine, Mr. Dan Delaney, showed me many years ago that if you add ice cubes in, it actually cools and dilutes. So it cools it down so it's not gonna be too hot, but it dilutes it so you're getting that sort of nice ratio. I kind of like a 1-to-1 vinegar to water ratio, maybe a little more water. Mike, what about you?
Mike likes a 2-to-1. I would say water to vinegar. That's on the I would say weaker side, but it's very well balanced.
I mean, just keep in mind, Mike grew up eating just French onion soup. That means
keep that in mind.
So when you're thinking about his advice, just keep that in mind. So I basically, you take that and you dilute it and just taste it. If it tastes too acidic, and there's too much vinegar in there, add a little bit of water. Or if it's too weak, like Mike's version, add some more vinegar in there. And then all I do is I take my onions, I slice them up super thin. You can mandolin them, you can cut them. Either way, it doesn't matter, because you will not be crying. You will be loving yourself. And then once it's cool to the touch, it can be warm, just don't want it to be hot because it will cook the onions. Cool to the touch, tossing your onions. And then you let it sit overnight and you've got pickled onions. The longer it goes, by 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, it becomes better and better and better. But by a day, you'll have something freaking delicious.
And that is it. That's the ultimate guide right there. We pretty much gave you a cookbook worth of onion recipes. You should never be struggling if you have those onions lying around. And that was the point of this video. We all have onions hanging around, but like Josh said, they don't have to be the supporting actor. They can be the star of the show. And these dishes really incorporated the onion as the star.
Golden Globes right here. These guys are freaking beautiful, and they deserve to be the star of the show.
And remember, try to find some Sunions in your local markets just to avoid the tears. It is mind-blowing. It's going to take me some time. It's one of those things, one of those fears that's so rooted in my cooking that it's going to be hard to remember to use onions more now that they are tearless, at least this kind.
Remember to subscribe. You can like and share if you like it. If you don't, just pretend it never happened. And we'll see you guys soon.